we can see that now have come to a head. And we also see the warnings that the prophets had given the judges and all these others that had told them what's fixing to take place. Again, they disregarded. And it seems that just many times like today, we are told time and time and time again of basically the same thing is the idea of repent or perish. And how soon do we forget? Much like Israel in the crossing of the Red Sea, the getting on the other side, they're beginning to murmur. They've forgotten about the plagues. They've forgotten about how God had taken care of them. They forgot about crossing the Red Sea on dry land. They forgot about the cloud and the pillar of fire at night. They forgot about all these things and how quickly the blessings sometimes that God gives to us we forget. Well, that's what has happened here. So the nation of Israel has now fallen prey to the nation of Babylon. And these are some of the things that Daniel has recorded, and that's what I want us to discuss a little bit about this morning. The purpose of Daniel is to show how God's providential guidance is there, his miraculous, we might say, intervention on a number of occasions, his foreknowledge of knowing what's going to take place, his almighty power. All these things are seen in the book of Daniel. Not only that, we can see that God of heaven controls, directs as far as nature, and even the mightiest of the kings. Here's Nebuchadnezzar, the first one we find. He is one of those individuals who he claims that, he's the King of kings. He is the greatest king. He is this or that. And we can see that God humbled him, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes as time may allow. But God has a divine plan. God has always given man a plan by which to go by. And there's this divine plan that is unfolds for Israel, seeing God's judgment against them. Now, another thing I want us to keep in mind is God's plan is both not only just as far as physical, but is also spiritual as well. How many times do we forget the spiritual blessing that God gives to us? How many times do we, I'll think about that. Maybe it crosses our mind and then it just kind of eludes us. And we think of something else. Maybe in our activities of the day, something may bring a thought to our mind as far as God's providence or God's miraculous power, whatever the case may be. And then quickly it's gone. What happens? Why does one of these things happen or take place? It's because we forget sometimes, is it not? How quickly we forget. We're a nation of hurry up and wait type people. We hurry to the grocery store and then we wait in line. Then we get upset because the red light doesn't change fast enough, or whatever the case may be. But God's power is seen many times, even as Babylon and Daniel, the three Hebrew children, all these, we can see God's power is seen time and time again, and that's what we want to talk about.
Milton, we know we're in trouble when we get impatient with the microwave.
Maybe the operator.
Yeah, could be the operator. I have to admit that I push the buttons too many times. The 000 instead of 1 minute, it winds up with 10 minutes, and I have to burn my popcorn. So yes, we do that. But here is Daniel as he is showing God's providential care, his miraculous power. We can see that Daniel was believed to be about, whenever these things are taking place, about in the age of 15 or somewhere in that area. Back in the time that these things take place, it was we might say, tradition of taking those that were in the king's household or those that were in, we might say, the king's care. They would take those individuals because they were higher educated or highly educated, and they would take those and bring them into the king's courtyard or courtship or whatever case may be. And he would take those individuals and learn of their tradition, learn of their language, learn of their backgrounds and things along that line. And why would you want to do? Why would they want to do that? Okay. Would it? All right. Anything else? You think it would help them better as far as being able to control them? That's the purpose there. That was the idea. Learn their language, and that way you could communicate with them. Otherwise, how can I communicate with somebody that speaks Arabic if I've never learned that language, or I have no one to interpret? How would you communicate? So you'd have quite a bit of a problem. So they would take those individuals that were educated and put them into this position. And we can see Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in these positions. We can also see that he lived under Nebuchadnezzar. He lived under Cyrus, Belshazzar, and also Darius, as far as being in the leadership capacity. And under these kings, we can see that Daniel impressed these kings time and time again. And he was given the almost, we might say, the second in command because of his love for God and being blessed by God. Amen. That's right. And we can also see that what was some of Daniel's might say some of his descendants. Anybody? We talked a little bit week before last about Hezekiah. It's believed that he was a descendant of Hezekiah, or the king of Hezekiah, King Hezekiah. So there again, he would be in that leadership capacity. He would have learned these things. He would have had knowledge of what had transpired during that time as well. And we talked a little bit about Isaiah. Okay. Another thing that we talked a little bit about is Nebuchadnezzar. He had taken over Jerusalem. He had destroyed the cities of Jerusalem. He had also, what else did he destroy that was so sacred to the Jews? The temple. Okay. So in destroying that, as far as their quote unquote religious holding, as far as the temple of Jerusalem was a sacred thing to them, and destroying that, what would it do as far as their spirituality? That which they held sacred is now destroyed. What do you think it would do to their spirits, we might say? It discouraged, that's right. So he sees these things. Not only that, we can see the inhabitants now, of course, has been taken into captivity. Well, in this time, one of the things that Nebuchadnezzar does is to build a statue. This statue, if you'll look into second or third chapter, is a very huge statue. So many cubic high, so many cubits wide, all these. So it would be a very large statue. And anybody remember exactly what they were to do when the trumpet sounds and all the musical bow down and worship? And this is something that again, we're seeing the miraculous power of God. Here is three individuals that said, I don't think so. Because you're not the God. And this is why Nebuchadnezzar had built this, was in honor to him. He was to be prayed to. He was to be honored. And he said, I don't think so. And whenever it came time for this, to be bowed before and worshiped, the Chaldeans finds these three young men saying, no, we're not going to bow to that. They're not. He's not the God of heaven. He is not the God of the Creator. And because of that, what happens? All righty. We know the story how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were cast into the fiery furnace. If I get messed up, sometimes I get them cast into the lion's den. Don't worry about it. You know which one it goes where. But anyway, they are cast into the fiery furnace. Notice something. The king's anger is so great. He takes the mightiest of his men or his soldiers and how these three men bound not only in their clothes, extra clothes, hats, all these extra things. Why would you think that would, why would you want to do that? There you go. Exactly right. It would torture them that much more. Okay. So, and then these three individuals or three mighty soldiers, this thing has been heated how many times hotter? 7 times hotter than it's supposed to be. And we'll teach them. He was pretty mad, wasn't he? In fact, the flames were so high and so mighty that it killed those three soldiers that cast them in. Notice something else. They were bound, so they couldn't kind of wiggle around and get out of those ropes, could they? So that's something else. That's exactly right. And we can see that whenever he got a little bit, we might say Nebuchadnezzar got too big for his britches, didn't he? You know, I'm the king. You just do whatever I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. Now, what caused Nebuchadnezzar's fall? Was his pride? Okay, go to Daniel, the 4th chapter. Daniel 4, and we want to deal with about verse 28. I think this is rather unique here.
Verse 25, we talk about being bound. Verse 25 says, I see 4 men loose.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
That's right. That's exactly right.
They're not bound anymore.
Yeah, and the 4th verse.
Yeah.
And they're not hurting either.
Notice the king's reaction to it. What did he say? Yes, sir. The 4th man looks like what? All right. All right.
All that stuff that they're bound and closed. It didn't even have any, it didn't singe or have any smoke.
No, that's right. Didn't even singe their hair or any smell of their clothes. Now, I don't know. I like to barbecue every once in a while. That smoke, I don't care where it is on that barbecue pit. If I would stand over here, it smells that way. If I stand over here, it blows this way. By the time I get through, my clothes smell like barbecue. And that's rather unique because here is flames that is lapping about them, and it doesn't bother them. It doesn't hurt them. Okay.
Probably, Brother Tom, his lesson, we talking about hair, probably getting hair wasn't seen.
Might not. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay. Now notice Daniel 4 there in verse 28. And this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. This is because of his pride. At the end of 12 months, he walked in. No, well, let's see. Let's go back a little bit earlier here. Chapter 4. I forgot what verse it was, and then I was going to comment about that. But anyway, there was a decree that Daniel told him that was going to take place, that these things, your pride has caused you to become too arrogant, too boastful. I am king, and no one is any greater than I am. And notice something else, that because of this, God says, not so. You're going to be going out into the field. How long did it take from the time that Daniel told the king these things till it took place? Verse 28. That's where I started. About a year. So here was God's patience for about a year before judgment came to Nebuchadnezzar. You think he had forgotten it? Probably. Well, he probably did forget it till it happened. Okay. Now, okay.
Even though prior to that, though, remember he made Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, promoted them in power. And said, put out a decree, you're going to worship not any God except their own God.
That's right.
So he had decided, got a vivid reminder of who's in charge. But God hadn't forgotten what he had done, and he was still not willing to bow and worship. He still wanted to keep his position. So that's why this other coming.
That's very true. Very true. Okay. All right. Now, notice something in chapter 4 there we're dealing with. He said there is going to be a period of time. How long was he to graze as the animals? It says his hair grew, his nails grew, his feet. All right. It says 7 times. And there has been, what I was getting at, there's been a controversy over that 7. Was it 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks? What was the period of time? It does not specify. That's correct. All right. Notice something that is, I think, is rather unique in this thing. After this period of time, what happens to Nebuchadnezzar? Does he humble himself? Yes, sir. It changes his attitude toward being so boastful, did it not? Most assuredly. Now, there's 4 things that I read in about Nebuchadnezzar, and I want to share those with you. The dream of a tree reaching into the heights, that's chapter 4. At the height of heaven and seen by all the world. Now, this is very true because Nebuchadnezzar was, at that time, the ruler of all the world, or known world. So he had a great deal of power, did he not? Yes, he saw that. All right, that's one thing about it. Second thing, the advice given by Daniel from God made it clear the error of his ways. Just talking about as far as he's humbling himself, not getting too big. The patience of God is seen. And it took how long? About 12 months for it to come true. That's very true. Notice something else, if you will. The punishment received by the king caused him to, again, humble himself. Daniel's prophecy of all these things in there in chapter 2 of Daniel. I think this is the one that I was trying to think of a while ago. So anyway, these things come about. Daniel realizes, Daniel tells the king, now what are you going to do with it? Okay. Notice something else. There in Daniel 2, there is a king, the king dreams a dream. But remember this dream, he couldn't remember what the dream was. Explain it to me. All these individuals, these astronomers and these sayers and all these king says, tell me, what is this dream? I can't remember what the dream is. Daniel does. There's 4 things that we might deal with there. He said there's going to be a head of gold. Who did that represent? Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian. They reigned from about 625 BC to about 539 BC. Okay. And then the second one, the arms, what were they going to be made of? Silver, okay.
Medo-Persian.
Medo-Persian, very good. 539 BC to about 331 BC. Okay. And then, of course, the belly and the thighs were made of what? Brass. All righty. Who did it represent?
Greek.
The Greeks. Okay. 331 BC to about 63 BC. And then we can see that of the legs and the feet were made of iron and clay. This represented what nation? The Romans. They reigned from about 146 BC to about 476 AD. So that was all these things have been predicted by Daniel many years before any of these things came about. So the prophet Daniel is telling us something of great importance. All righty. Any questions? All right. A little bit further on down past chapter 4, we find chapter 5. What's unique about chapter 5? Anybody remember? No, there was the Belshazzar is now the king. Okay. What made him unique? What did the Lord? Okay. Good. Belshazzar? Yeah. And again, Daniel interprets the writing on the wall. I didn't remember where he was, what his background, exactly what his background was. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar does come back, though, from that. Now, okay, the writing on the wall, what did it mean? Found wanting, okay? Now, when Daniel interpreted this writing, how quickly did it come about? That night, okay? Okay. Now, notice, if you will, in verse 22 of this chapter. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knowest all these things, but hast lifted. Notice, each one of these kings that we deal with, whether it's Hezekiah, whether it's Cyrus, whether it's the Babylonians or any of these things, whenever they get so much pride, God humbles them. Notice there in verse 23, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee. They desecrated these things. And he says, this night, this day, this judgment is coming immediately. And it does. And he was killed just almost after these things were told. So, okay. All right. Now, in that night, Belshazzar, verse 30, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. And Darius, the Medo-Persian, took the kingdom. Okay. Now, Daniel 6 is another chapter that kind of stands out for us. What takes place there? Sure. Okay. All righty. What was that? Okay. Now, Daniel is raised to a high position. Notice something else. What was he supposed to do? Not pray. And he supposed to, if you do pray, you pray to the king. No, I'm the big chief. Yeah, and not only did he pray and he disregard, he opened the windows. And it was very obvious. In other words, you could pass by and see what was going on. Again, the king's anger was kindled, was it not? Had he made a decree? Was the king sorry for what he had done? The decree that he had made? Yes, he was.
praising him. We all around us, and like the sign of prayer, because Daniel was one to pray every day, 3 times a day, and he was on the cross. And I was so jealous of his text, and wanted was the most stuff my kid do is pray.
That's right.
And we did that yesterday.
Yeah. What?
I wonder why Bill Shaker didn't learn a lesson from Nebuchadnezzar. Don't mess with this guy. Go pick on somebody, you can go find you somebody else. Leave that in the law.
That's right.
Don't work out too good.
That's right. Notice in chapter 6 there in verse 7, and all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and princes and counselors and captains and all these got together and said, we're going to get rid of Daniel, basically. And if you don't bow, don't pray, don't do these things, well, we're just going to have you thrown into the lion's den. Whoever does it. And notice something that I think is rather unique. Now, the king established this. He makes the decree, signs its writing, and once it's put in writing, what does it say? It cannot be changed. Can't change it. Can't alter it. Okay. Now, Daniel knew that the writing was signed. He knew what was going to take place if he got caught. But he did it anyway, did he not? Now, question. If God tells us to do something and we understand it and we say, no, I don't want to do it, whose fault is it? Ours. Because we can't say, well, God, you caused me to do that. No, he didn't do that. He gave us commands, simple commands. There is not anything that God has given us as far as commands that we can't do.
Or understand.
Very good. It's strictly up to us to do it.
He wouldn't give us something that we were amenable for if we couldn't understand it.
That's correct. We can even go back even to Genesis, where with Adam and Eve. Very simple command: "Thou shalt not eat of the tree in the midst of the garden." How hard is that?
They went for some time before they did it.
Well, that's true. That's right. And this is something else that I want us to understand. How many times do we see something? Well, let me ask you this. If you tell a child, now don't go near that, let's say, pan that's on the stove. And don't touch it, And now they might leave it alone for a while, but what happens whenever your back is turned? They go, oh, we won't see, curiosity. Usually maybe it's one finger. I know the little grandson now, he tell him no, he just touches it with one finger. So here's the idea that is conveyed here. Don't do it. Oh, let's just try it one time. One time, let's try it. But Daniel was one of that, regardless of what God's command said, I'm going to do it, or regardless of the consequences. I'm going to do it. I am going to obey God rather than men.
You think about it. Daniel knows and saw, heard of these things. What happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
Oh, yes.
Okay. See how that has affected him and his faith, that God will bless and take care of them. Then when they tell him, you can't pray 3 times a day, he didn't have any worry or question about it.
Okay, that's right.
Would you say that is?
He didn't talk to child. And God had always taken care of him. So what else would he?
But he actually saw this in action, in my thinking of what happened to these three.
That's right.
They were friends, and I remember they were connected up at the beginning of this event today. And they had choices to make.
That's exactly right.
They all made the right choice, and how did he come out for them?
That's right. God.
Still walking around.
Now, notice there's two things I want us to keep in mind. First thing that I want to keep in mind is the lion's den was actually what we would call a pit. Later, if you'll notice later on, those that had talked the king into signing this decree, one of the things it says that as they were cast into it, I was reading one of the articles, they were cast into it. Most of the time, the individuals that were cast into would break a leg, arm, or some parts of the body where they would become immobile, therefore not being able to defend themselves against the lions. So that in and of itself was bad enough. But let's notice two things here I want us to understand. First, he is cast into it. There's no bones broken, because we can see that he's walking around, evidently he's walking around, or he's taking care of things anyway, whenever the king asks him what's going on. Raise him up out of the pit, okay? So it was long enough that he had to be raised with probably a rope of some type to get him out of this pit, correct? And then the second thing, the lions did not bother him. The mouths were shut, okay? So two things took place, did it not? That of not being broken, his bones not being broken, and secondly, the lions not devouring him.
Go back to King Darius. We can learn a huge lesson from him because he listened to the wrong people. He liked them.
Mm-hmm.
He never dreamed that was what they were plotting. He
Right.
just took their word for it. You don't do that. You try
Yeah.
to listen to the right people.
And along that line, let's notice verses 17 and 18, or 16, 17, 18, and 19. The king's command goes into effect. Daniel is cast into the lion's den. Notice there, the king went into his palace, verse 18, and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought. He wasn't satisfied. That's what we call it. And his sleep went from him, verse latter part. So he was greatly troubled, was he not? Because, like I said, he liked Daniel. And notice something else that I think just kind of brought to my mind. And when he came to the den the next morning, he cried with a lamentable or with great distress, because he figured Daniel had been eaten by the lions. Notice, he cried with a groan, Daniel, and the king spoke, said to him, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? What was the answer? I.
He said, "Son of thou service continually, not just what I needed here, when I get done, it was continual thing."
Okay.
And what Teresa said, Darius may have already, I'm sure he probably had heard about who God was and that these folks served him, and he might have been worried about what was going to happen to him as well. If Daniel was killed.
That's correct. All right. Notice verse 25. After these things take place, of course, those that had brought these accusations against Daniel, they were killed. Notice there in verse 24, women, the men, the whole families were cast into broke their bones in pieces and devoured them. There in verse 25. Then the king Darius wrote unto all people, nations, languages that dwelt in all the earth, peace be multiplied. I make a decree. Remember what we said earlier about the decree? Once he makes a decree, what was it? That's it. You can't change it. That's the policy. You can't change it. That in every dominion of the kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is a living God. Now, those imitations that they had been worshiping, think they could have taken care of this? Nope. How many times did they have the contest between God of heaven and the false gods of the different kingdoms, and God showed his power each time? That's right. And notice something else that this decree went out. For he is a living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. Is this a prophecy? Yes, it is. It is.
2 minutes, brother.
Can't do 2 minutes. I haven't been talking that long. Goes back to Daniel 2, verse 44, as far as the prophecy of the kingdom to come, or with Christ, also in chapter 4, verse 3, and also in chapter 7 and verse 14.
You know, it does say in this commentary, chapter 2, 7 was written in Arabic, and the rest of it's in Hebrew. So that was section. It's no big deal.
No.
Some reason it's written in Arabic.
There's been quite a diversity as far as why was it written in different ones. We have to keep in mind Daniel was writing. He was writing under these different kings, was it not? So he was keeping a history of what was going on. So they would be written in different language depending on the king. Okay. Well, our time seems to have come and gone. We'll want to go over each chapter and bring out the high points of each one. And then we're going to get into our questions. Any questions anyone have? All right. I appreciate so much everyone's comment. Thank you very much. And hopefully that we got to have a better understanding of at least some of the background of Daniel. Okay.
Oh, bless you, could take care of her and fine. It looks like he had a new face. That's good. Go ahead. Okay, wait on the day. Okay. I'm gonna walk. I gotta walk.
You gotta go back to you. Go back.
Keep your little hands on there.
Stands out with things that the king brings us into and leads them and takes care of them. And there are things that
Yes, and you know, I think that right out of the box. And I think you did that, and he said, yes, but I'm so, it's not even right out of the box. Hey, hey, how are y'all?
he called it. No, these were.
Hey, are you the smartest?
They were.
Like Glasgow, like the Glasgow.
They still really good.
Yeah, Yeah, they're pretty sharp.
Taylor was solid, and not hitting the
The
rock.
only thing about Taylor when I had her in class, she just talked all the time.
She's still a joke.
I'm kidding, you know I'm kidding.
I've been down and I'm doing stuff all the time.
More solid.
Yeah.
Okay. As we continue our worship this morning, it's good to see everyone that's been able to come and to assemble with us, and to those that are live streaming at home, we thank you for taking time to stop and to worship as well.